Welcome back to the laboratory, dear friends. No ghost stories tonight. No heists, no masked bandits, no metal beards. Tonight, the Society convenes in special session to examine the most important false alarm in the history of the human race. It is autumn 1983, and the world is closer to the edge than almost anyone watching television knows. 3 weeks earlier, a passenger airliner, Korean Airlines Flight 007, strayed into Soviet airspace and was shot from the sky, and 269 people fell into the sea. The superpowers are no longer speaking. Each is certain the other might be preparing something unthinkable. And in the middle of that dreadful quiet, on the night of September 26th, a computer screen in a bunker south of Moscow lights up with a single word: launch. I am the magnanimous Dr. Warthen, and this is the Broken Machine Society. Case file number 4, 5 missiles. If you believe stories like this one must be remembered, the like button is how you tell the librarians. Now, to understand tonight's case, you must first admire the machine at the center of it. The Soviet Union had built itself an eye, a system called OKO, the word itself means eye, a small fleet of satellites swinging on high, looping orbits, arranged to stare down at the American missile fields, not from directly above, but from the side, at a grazing angle against the black velvet of empty space. And that, dear friends, was genuinely clever. A rising missile burns. Seen edge-on against the darkness, its plume is a candle flaring against black cloth. No warm continents behind it to confuse the sensors. No city lights, just cold space. And, if the worst day ever arrived, a line of bright candles climbing out of Montana and the Dakotas. The engineers who designed it were not fools. Remember that. It matters later. Speaking of watchful eyes, I am told it is time for a brief word from tonight's sponsor. I have no sponsor. Tonight, that seems fitting. Where were we? Yes. 15 minutes past midnight, September 26th, 1983. Serpakov 15, the secret command center where the eye's nerves all meet. The duty officer that night is a 44-year-old lieutenant colonel named Stanislav Petrov, an engineer by training, one of the men who had helped write the very procedures sitting on that desk. And at 15 minutes past midnight, the sirens begin. The great red screen wakes. One launch, it says, one American missile rising. And the system does not whisper this. It reports its confidence in that peculiar language machines use when they are most dangerous. Highest reliability. Certainty. Petrov's duty in that moment was not to fire anything. The Society files this precisely because the legend has grown taller than the man ever claimed to be. His duty was to judge, real or false, and report it up the chain, where sleeping men with terrible authority would take his word as the first fact of a new world. He stared at one missile and doubted. Nobody, he reasoned, starts the end of the world with a single missile. And then, as if the machine had heard him, a second launch, a third, a fourth, a fifth. 5 candles, says the eye. Certainty, says the eye. Think of the room, dear friends. The siren, the red letters, dozens of faces turning toward one desk. Below the horizon, the ground radars, the second independent eye, could not yet see what the satellites claimed was flying. For several more minutes, the sky would offer no second opinion. And every one of those minutes, if the candles were real, was a minute stolen from his country's answer. That is the trap of the clock. Doubt is expensive precisely when it is most necessary. Petrov picked up the telephone and reported malfunction, false alarm. He said, many years later, that he was never certain. He called his own odds 50-50, but 5, he judged, was a strange number for Armageddon. Too many for an accident, far too few for a first strike. And he was an engineer. He knew what the eye was made of because he had helped raise it, and he did not yet trust it as far as the end of the world. So the first gate in the machinery of retaliation held. And then the minutes passed, and the radars swept the horizon, and the horizon was empty. Nothing was flying. Nothing had ever been flying. So what did the eye see? Here is the autopsy, and it is almost beautiful. It was the equinox, the season when the sun crosses the equator and the geometry of sunlight goes strange. High above the American plains, sunlight glanced off the tops of high-altitude clouds, and for a little while, the sun, those clouds, and one Soviet satellite lined up like the pieces of an accidental lens. 5 bright infrared glints, drifting exactly where rising missiles ought to be. The eye saw precisely what it was built to see: candles against the dark. Its designers had imagined almost everything, except the sun itself kneeling down to light false ones. Afterward, the system was taught better: new geometry, second opinions, cross-checks against other eyes. The eye grew wiser. Machines usually do, afterward. And the man? He was praised, briefly, then reprimanded, officially, over paperwork. The war diary he had not filled in while deciding the fate of the world. He was never rewarded, never punished, and within a year he had quietly left the service. He told no one. For 15 years, the night of the 5 missiles simply did not exist, until an old general's memoirs surfaced it in 1998, and the world went looking for a retired engineer in a small apartment near Moscow, and found him, politely astonished by the fuss. They gave him prizes, late. They made a film and called him the man who saved the world. He shrugged at the title, more or less. Right man, he said, right chair, right night. He died in the spring of 2017, and the world did not learn of it for months. That silence, members, is its own kind of monument. And here is tonight's lesson, and the Society asks you to sit with it. Every case in our files ends the same way. The machine was honest. The switches obeyed their typo. The satellite repeated the loudest voice. Machines do exactly what they are told, and tonight, that is precisely what makes the story terrible. The eye was honest. The eye was certain. And the eye was wrong. The rarest thing in all our files is not a machine that fails. It is a human being standing in front of a machine that claims certainty, with the knowledge and the courage and the 15 quiet minutes to doubt it. As we teach our machines to decide ever faster, faster at last than any human can doubt, the Society suggests we remember what exactly stood between the eye and the end. One engineer who knew how the machine was made. Case closed. Next time, before the Society, Chicago, 1987. A grinning mask, 90 seconds of chaos on the public airwaves, and the only case in the Society's files that remains, to this very day, unsolved. Lighter mischief returns, dear friends, mostly. Stay curious, cross-check your instruments, and keep one human in the loop. The Society is adjourned.